Okay guys, so welcome back again. So in this video, we are going to make iOS style segment control. So for those of you who don't know what a segment control is, that it lets you switch between different switches like we have on the screen, that this is segment control, and the UI is pretty much same as we have in the iOS devices, that is the Apple devices. So currently we have the selected index to be 0 and the selected item is Facebook. And if we click on any of the items, we see that we have the animation going on in the background. That is the white box animates to the position or the index we selected. And if we go to Google, we have the selected index is 3 because the arrays based index arrays are index based 0. And we can select between these items here. So that's what we are going to make in this video using React and using Framer Motion. So for this video, what I've done is this, that I've created a very basic React project by using the npx create React app package. And then what I've done is this, that inside the package.json file, I've installed one dependency called Framer Motion. So if you can see here, we have this dependency here called Framer Motion, and we are using this version here. And then we are using the React version 18.2.0, but it doesn't matter if you are even on the lower version of React. So let's dive into the app.js file, and these are all the default files which you get when you create a brand new React application using the create React app package. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new file here called segment control, because I want to make this segment control like reusable inside different parts of the application. So I'm not going to hard code any of the values here or any of the item names here. That would be dynamically coming from the place where you intend to use the segment control. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new file inside the source folder called segmentcontrol.js. So segmentcontrol.js, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this segment control thing here, and I am going to create a new file called segmentcontrol.css inside the source folder. So let me create a new file, segmentcontrol.css, like this. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a functional component here inside segmentcontrol.js. So maybe I can minimize the sidebar here. So here I'm going to use the snippet called RFC to create a functional component, or exporting a default functional component. And if you're wondering that how I can do using the RFC thing, it is because I'm using an extension here called AS7 React Redux Snippets. So this is the extension I'm using here, and it lets you do the magic by simply typing in RFC, and then you can get the whole of the functional component export. So let me close this tab here, and if I save this, we have no changes here inside the app.js file. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to import this segment control inside my app.js file, and I'm going to remove each and everything from here inside the header tags, and I just leave this class name with the app open, because then I would be having the center this thing here. So let me do segment control like this, and it is automatically imported here from the very top. And if I save this, or we can go back to our application here that is running on localhost 3000. And now we can see that we see this thing here, that is segment control. And if we go to the segment control, we can make it 1, 2, 3, and we have this thing working here. So what do we want to do inside the segment control.js file? I'm going to create the layout first, and then we are going to style it using the CSS. So here initially I want to export in a fragment here, like the empty tags here. And then here I want to create a div with the class name of control container. So dot control container. Though I could have created the layout beforehand, but I wanted to show you that how do we design a particular element using React and Framer Motion, or how do we do the animations using React and Framer Motion. So that is my idea. That is how do I lay out my how did I lay out this segment control here. So that's why I'm starting from scratch here. So basically this control container means this whole container here in which everything resides about the segment control. And now inside this thing, I want to have a list of array items so that I can loop through the array items. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a constant variable for now here. So let me create a variable called const items equal to 1 to 3. So let it be hard coded here, and later on we would be changing it dynamically. That would be coming as props to the segment control. So here inside this thing, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the items.map method, that is items.map. We have the individual item, and let me keep it inside the brackets here like this. And this should have an index also like this, and we would be requiring this index later on, so therefore I have provided in the index of the item here. And here, what do we want to return? We simply want to return a div like this with a class name of control item, control hyphen item like this. And here inside this thing, we would be simply rendering out the item dot, or we would be simply rendering out the item here. So let me save this, and now we see that we have this thing here that is 1, 2, and 3, because that is what is contained inside my items array here. So before I do anything, what I'm going to do, I'm going to style this thing here, that is dot control container, so that you should be understanding that what's all going on inside this thing here. So let me target the class here, and let me for now give it a background color of red like this. And now this thing doesn't work because we need to import the segment control.css file inside our segment control.js file. So I could say dot import segment control.css, and if I save this, we see that we have the control container here. But what do we want to have is this, or before doing anything, let me also give it a style, that is this control item in a style. So let me give this a style of let's say background color of let's say for now blue. So now we see that we have this thing here. And now what do I want to do? I want to create this control container as a inline flex item, so that or let me show it to you. So let me simply display it as flex like this, and now we see that we have these items here. And let me increase the font size, not this font size, but here the zoom level. So we see that this is the control container and this is the items here. But what do we want to have is this, that we want to have this control container as an inline flex. So instead of displaying it as flex, I would be displaying it as inline flex like this. And now I would be giving it a padding of, let's see, 4 pixels top and bottom and 8 pixels left and right. So we have this thing now, something like this here. And let me keep it 4 pixels on all the sides like this. And now what I want to do, I want to have a column gap between each of the flex item. So let me provide in a column gap. So column gap would be 4 pixels. And then I would be justifying the, or let me save it, and we have this thing here. And now what I need to do, I need to simply do justify content space between like this, though it doesn't have any effect, but I just provided it for no reason, I suppose. And now let's give it a border radius of, let's say, 4 pixels like this, so that our red box is a border radius of something like this. And let me also give it a margin of top and bottom. So margin of top and bottom of 16 pixels and 0. And it is completely dependent on you that whether you want to give it a margin or not, though you can manage that later on also, but I just gave it here so that I can have some white space at the top here. And now let me target in the control item. So for the control item, what I would do, I would give it a minimum width here. So minimum width would be 44 pixels. So let me save this. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a border radius of again 4 pixels. And now the cursor to be pointer, because right now if I hover over it, it isn't a pointer here. So I would be changing the cursor to be the pointer. So cursor to be pointer. And I also want to give it a padding of 4 pixels top and bottom on, and 8 pixels left and right. So we have this thing here, and let me minimize the zoom level here. That is, let's keep it on, let's keep it at 400%. So we have this thing here, and we have the hand icon here. So now what I want to do, I want to simply delete this control item color from here. Now we have this thing here, and we also delete the color, background color of the control container. So now we are left with this thing here. So for the segment control in iOS, we have the background color. So let me copy in the background color, which is the actual color which we are going to use. So this is this color here, RGBA, and you can copy and paste the values inside your file. So let me save it. And now we have this kind of a grayish background here. And this, and for this, we also need to have a box shadow. That is an inset box shadow for this control container, so that we have some kind of a shadow, inner shadow inside this box container. So let me paste it here, and now we see that we have a shadow here inside the control container class. So again, you can copy and paste these values because these are like hard-coded values. And if you want to change it according to your taste or according to your control or according to your style, you can again modify whatever you want to do. So that's all what we want to do inside the control container class and the control item class here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go inside my segment control, and now we want to have some kind of a white background. So let me minimize it. So we want to have some kind of a white background behind each of the elements. As we can see here, we have the white background that moves behind the elements. So what we can do, we can go here, and where we are returning this control item, what we can do, we can create one more div inside this item, and let me call this control item background. So control hyphen item hyphen bg, like this. So this is the control item background, and again I'm going to create one more div, and that would be called control item text, because currently we are simply rendering out the item here, but we want to control it using the control item text class, like this. So this should be like this thing here. Now we have a div like this, and let me put this item here. And now let's style these two classes, that is the control item bg and control item text. So let's go to the segment control.css file, and here let me copy the class name and let me paste it here like this. And for now, let's give it a background color of, let's say, white, like this. And I want to position it absolutely to the containing element. So I would say position absolute, like this. And if we are positioning this absolutely to this control item class, because this control item bg is inside control item, so this control item needs to have a position of relative. So let's give it a position of not inherit but relative, like this. And now this control item bg would be positioned absolutely to this control item class. And let's give it a top of, let's say, 0, left of, again, let's say, 0, and width, height of 100%, and width of 100%, like this. And now we see that everything is like white out here, and because the text is behind this white boxes here. And what I can do, I can change the border radius of this background thing here. So let me provide in a border radius here. So border radius of, again, let's say 4 pixels, like this. And now we have this thing here, that is, we have the border radius for each of the items here. And now what we want to do, we want to move the text above this control item background class. So what we can do, we can style it using this control item text thing here. So let me target that class here. So control item text. And here I would need to have a z index here of, let's say, 1. And whenever you need to provide a z index, you need to give it a position of something like something. So here I'm going to provide a position of relative. And now we see we have the text here. And what more we can do, we want to transform the text here. So we can say text transform to be capitalized, like this, so that even if we have something in lowercase letters, like 1 we have in lowercase here, but we still see this one here. But now what do we want to do, we want to track the click events on these items here, that is on the control item. So how do we track that? So that is pretty simple to do. We need to create some kind of a state variable here. So let me call it user state here, and here we can say current index, that is the currently selected index. So for now, let's start with index 0 here, and we need to import user state from React. So it is automatically imported here. And now what we want to do, we want to display this white background only when the item is selected. So before doing anything, what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply copy and paste in some CSS, some HTML here, so that I can be faster here, because that has nothing to do with styling and animations. So here I just created a div with a class name, with an empty class name, and I just gave it a style of margin top 16 pixels, so that we have a margin here. And then we are simply displaying the selected item using the items, and then getting the item from the current index, because this is a state variable here, current index. So therefore we see 1 here, and we can also see the selected index as current index, and that is 0. So what we want to have is this, that whenever we click on any of the items, we want to change the current index. So what can we do? We can have an on-click event on this control item. So we can say on-click, or we can say like set current index to be the index, like this. So now that is the reason why I added index here, that is the index of the item to my map method here, so that we have the item also, and as well as the index also, so that we can set the current index according to the index on which we are on. So if I save this, and if we click on number 2, we see that we are getting the selected index as 1. If we click on 3, we get this thing here. And now what we want to do, we want to display the white background only if the current index is the index on which we clicked on. So that if we click on 1, white should be present here. If we click on 2, white background should be present here. And if we click on 3, white background should be present here. So again, that is pretty simple to do. We can simply render out this div depending on the current index and the index here. So what we can do, we can make a check here, that is if current index equal to index, then only we want to render out this div here. So if I save this, we see that we have the div here, and that is 3 here. If we click on 1, we have 1 here, we have 2 here, we have 3 here. So we see that we are going somewhere near our completed application, that is this application. So we are somewhere near around here. And now what we can do, we can animate these boxes very easily using framer motion. And for that, what you need to do, you need to import simply motion from framer motions. Import motion from framer motion. So framer motion like this, and we want to animate this white background, that is this control item background, because that is the only thing that needs to be animated. So what we need to do, we need to create convert this element into a motion element using motion.div. So we can say motion.div like this, and now we need to give this div an ID, or we need to provide some kind of a unique ID to this div so that we can have smooth animations. So how can we give an ID? So it is pretty simple to do. We can use any number here. So we can say layout ID, and this prop, that is layout ID, you can only provide to motion components. And we since we created our div into a motion component using motion.div, so therefore we can provide in a layout ID. So let me provide in 1 2 3, but in your application this should be a unique ID. So to get a unique ID, what I can do, I can use the use ID hook from React. So I can say use ID from React like this, and we can say const ID equal to use ID, and we imported use ID from React here. And now we can use this ID here, that is, instead of hard coding the ID, I can simply use the ID here, that is the layout ID. And if we save this, we have everything working here. So that is the only thing you need to do to make this animate from one position to another position. So if I click on 2, we see that we have the animation here. And if we click on 1, we have this thing here. And it is all animating very smoothly. And now a bit of change I would like to prefer here inside this control item background, that is this white box. Inside iOS, there is some kind of a shadow behind this white box. So what I can do, I can go to my control item background and I can paste in this box shadow here, so that we have some kind of a box shadow behind this item here. So if I can click on 1 here, and if I zoom into this thing, we see that we have some kind of a shadow behind this white box here. So that's how easy it is to create the segment control using framer motion. And now, since I told you at the very beginning that I wanted to make this component as a reusable component inside your application so that the items are not hard coded here. So what we can do, we can pass in some props here. So let me pass in some props here. So the first prop we would like to pass is the items prop itself, that is items. Then we also need to provide in the initial index. So let's say initial index. That is what index should be selected initially. So let's say that the initial index would be 0, or rather the default value of the initial index would be 0. And now whenever we are passing this initial index from the parent component, we can use that state to provide in the current index using the initial index. So let me provide in this thing here, initial index like this. And now we also wanted to handle the change. That is when someone clicks here, we are simply setting the current index to be this thing here. So what we can do, we can provide an our on change event handler from the segment control whenever we call it from a different component. So we can say on change, and this would be a function. So let me save this. And now whenever we change the index, we need to call this on change function. So let me save this and let me go to the app.js file, and here we see that we get this error here, and just ignore the div error. It is only because we have not imported React from React. So now it says that we need to provide these 3 items here. If we do not provide an items here, we would be using the default items array. If we do not provide in the initial index, we would be using the default index, that is 0. And we need to always provide this on change event. So we can say or on change props. So on change, we have an arrow function here, and here what we can do, we can simply console log the value. So console.log, and here we would be passing in 2 things, that is the index comma value. That is the index of the item as well as the selected item. So let's log it here. So index comma value, like this. So we have this thing here, and what more we can do, we can also provide in our own items array. So let me copy and paste in the own items array. So let's use this items array from my previous project here. So let me provide in the previous items here, so that this default 1 to 3 is not used. And now I would also like to provide in the initial index. Or before providing in the initial index, let's say what we have here. So if I save this, we have this thing here. So we have Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and we see that the animations are working fine, and it's dependent on what all items do we provide inside this array. So what more do we want to have is this, that we need to provide some kind of a initial value, so that in case you want to select any other index initially, so what we can do, we can simply say initial index, let's say this time provide 2. So let's save this and let's reload the page. So we see that the current index selected by default is index 2. And if we reload again, we see that the by default Netflix is selected because it is on the index 0. And if we select Amazon, we have this thing here. And if you open a browser console, we see that we do not get any log statements, and that is because we have not handled this on change function from inside our segment control class. So let's go to our segment control class, and here what we need to do, we need to use the use effect hook. So we can say use effect, and here we do not want to return anything. And when do we want to call this use effect? We always want to call this use effect whenever the current index changes. And of course, we need to import use effect from React. So now we have the use effect imported here. And now whenever the current index changes, we want to simply call in this function here that is passed here as a prop. So we can say on change, and here we need to pass in the current index, and here we also need to pass in the items comma current index, like this, so that we have the index as well as the item inside the array. So if we save this, and if you open a browser console here, we see that Netflix is selected, and if we click on Facebook, we see 0. Facebook is selected, Google, Amazon, Netflix, and so on and so forth. So guys, this is how easy it is to create your own segment control component to be used inside your React application. And if you want, you can simply copy and paste the code from the repo here. It is hosted on GitHub, and that's all about this video. So if you have liked the video, do hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe to the channel. So thank you, bye bye, tata, take care, and have a good day and have a great day.